Welcome everyone, Crazy here, and today I'll be speculating what Chapter 30.5 and Chapter 31 could be in Dead by Daylight. So starting off here, Chapter 30.5 is a mid-chapter, which is why it is called Chapter 30.5 and not Chapter 31. This will be a single survivor chapter and will not include a killer. Also, it is releasing this month in January, so it should be coming pretty soon here. Also, in March, we will have a full chapter, which will include a killer and a survivor. So for Chapter 30.5, we should have a PTB release within the next handful of days, either on January 9th or 10th. This date could change, however. I got this information from Dweet on Twitter, who is a very reliable Dead by Daylight leaker who has leaked a lot of things in the past. This means it could be very likely we will get a chapter reveal pretty soon here, because usually they reveal the chapter before the PTB. Also, for Chapter 31, again according to Dweet on Discord, it will be an original chapter. For Chapter 30.5, we are still not 100% sure if it will be licensed, however. So far, the only solo survivor chapter we have had that was not licensed has been Michaela Reed. And when they did that, they introduced a brand new game mechanic with her perks, which were the Boon Totems. Because of this reason, if they were to introduce an original survivor for Chapter 30.5, I do believe it would introduce a brand new game mechanic along with it. I don't believe they would introduce yet another game mechanic this soon after so many different changes in the game, so I personally believe Chapter 30.5 very well could be licensed. Especially because it has already been leaked that Chapter 31 was original. And that's very strange that Chapter 31 was leaked, but 30.5 wasn't. This could mean that 30.5 is licensed and they're keeping a tighter wrap on that chapter to make sure it doesn't get leaked out. Now that that's explained, I do want to move on to some potential original characters they could add into the game. Of course, these could be added into the Chapter 30.5 solo survivor chapter, but I think most likely that will be licensed like I said, and that these will actually be for the March chapter, which will be the full chapter. But again, of course, some of these could be for the 30.5 chapter. So, I think Chapter 31 is definitely going to be the casting of Frank Stone. I can say with almost 90% certainty this is going to be the case, because it is a game that is going to be releasing this year. And these are brand new characters that they could totally add into the game and fit perfectly with it being in the same universe. This chapter would of course include Frank Stone as the killer. As for the survivor, it's hard to tell who would be the main survivor in this game. I assume the character in the forefront here is the quote-unquote main character because they have a greater focus on them. I'm almost certain Chapter 31 will be the casting of Frank Stone. However, I do believe there could be another possibility of them maybe doing a completely brand new character that we have not seen before. Of course, I can't really speculate on that because they could really do anything. But however, there is some other ideas that could potentially be in play here. For example, we could have the Observer as the survivor for this chapter. And then for the killer, we can have either the Spider Killer, which we see in the Tome lore, or we could see this vampire character that we do see in the Tome lore as well. Another potential chapter based off of the Tome lore would be Saku from Maurice's Tome lore. In this tome, there's a lot of creatures shown. One of the ones they could do would be this zombie samurai we see here, but there's many other possibilities shown in the Tome lore as well for other creatures. These would be really cool additions into the game, however I do still believe the casting of Frank Stone would be most likely for Chapter 31, and if not that, a completely brand new character that we've never seen before. And of course, any of those survivors I mentioned could be included in Chapter 30.5 instead, but I do still believe Chapter 30.5 could be licensed. Because of that, I'm going to go over a ton of different licensed possibilities for these survivors, and yeah, I'll give my opinion on which ones I think are more likely and less likely. So one of the biggest ones going around right now is the idea of having Rick Grimes as the solo survivor for Chapter 30.5 releasing pretty soon here. They can even have Michonne as a legendary skin, and maybe even a Daryl legendary skin. The reasoning for this is because Walking Dead is doing a brand new spin-off show called The Ones Who Live, and it's releasing pretty soon here. This includes Michonne and Rick Grimes as main characters. So you would assume they would want to do a lot of promotion for this brand new show to have people talking about it. And they actually have already started doing some collaborations to hype up for the show. It has been leaked that Modern Warfare 3 will be getting a Walking Dead crossover for the Ones Who Live show. Also, Walking Dead's collaborated with many other games like Fortnite, Rogue Company, even Dying Light, and many others. So they seem to be very open to doing collaborations with games. Because of this, I think this is probably the most likely character to be releasing for Chapter 30.5. I would hope that they would have Michonne and Daryl legendaries for him, but I would just be happy to see Rick Grimes as well. And moving on to an interesting possibility, we have RJ McCready from John Carpenter's The Thing. And there's some reasoning for why I put him on this list. So if you didn't know, there's a brand new game that came out pretty recently here called Pinball M. Pinball M is a pinball horror game. And in this game, they do have a Dead by Daylight table where you can play Dead by Daylight pinball. This game also features other licensed tables such as Chucky's Pinball and The Thing Pinball. I mention this because Dead by Daylight obviously has collaborated with Chucky with their recent chapter as well. A while back when they revealed this, I found this pretty interesting that both Dead by Daylight and Chucky were in the game, because it showed that maybe Chucky's license holders were more open to adding their stuff into video games. And so I looked more into this, and I actually bought the Pinball M game to kind of check out how this game worked and all the different stuff for it. When I went into the game, I found a legal information section which mentioned all the different license holders. And what's worth noting is Universal Studios has the license for not only The Thing, but also Chucky. And obviously that means they contacted just Universal Studios to get both of these licenses. This is actually really important information because Dead by Daylight also licensed Chucky through Universal, which means they already have contact with the same company to get the Thing license. I think this makes it very, very possible we will be getting The Thing eventually in Dead by Daylight. The only thing is I don't know when it would be. For Chapter 30.5, because it is a solo chapter, that means we wouldn't have The Thing as a killer. I'm not too sure if they would go this route. It would be a really hard killer to introduce into the game, with it shaping it to different forms and things like that. But I think if they were to introduce The Thing as a killer, I would prefer them to do a full chapter later on, instead of for Chapter 30.5. Because of that reasoning, I'm unsure if RJ McCready would be Chapter 30.5 as a solo survivor, because I think they might try their shot at doing a Thing killer. Moving on to another possibility, I understand a lot of people might think this one's a little silly, but I would love to have Shaggy from Scooby-Doo in the game. I would prefer to have the live-action version played by Matthew Lillard, and I think it would actually be really cool to have Scooby-Doo in the game. Sure, it is a little silly, but I mean, we do have a killer teddy bear in Dead by Daylight as well, so I think it would fit pretty well actually. This would make sense as a solo survivor as well, because there's so many members of the Mystery Gang, it would be hard to add every single one as their individual characters with brand new perks, so it would make more sense to do Shaggy as the main survivor, and all the other Mystery Gang members as legendary skins. I think it would be really cool if they were able to introduce Scooby-Doo into the game. Many people might think that the license holders wouldn't be open to putting this set of characters in a mature game, but it is worth noting that they have done a mature show, which was Velma, so I think they would be okay with adding them into Dead by Daylight. Another potential survivor could be Alan Wake. Alan Wake 2 did release very recently, and a lot of people are really enjoying the game, and it would be a perfect time to add Alan Wake as his very own survivor in Dead by Daylight. He has also been added into Fortnite as well, so there is some crossover potential there. Another possibility could be Wednesday Addams. The Wednesday show is actually produced by Netflix, which Dead by Daylight now has contact with again because Stranger Things has been added back into the game. So there could be some potential for them to contact them and get Wednesday Addams in the game. Also worth mentioning that Wednesday was in the satisfaction survey, so it is on their radar. Another one that would be very silly to have in the game would be Brenda from Scary Movie, and they could even have Cindy as a legendary skin. It seems Dead by Daylight is more willing to add comedic characters in the game because we do have Chucky now, which really opens the door for comedy in Dead by Daylight. Because of that, I think these characters would fit really well in the game actually. Another potential chapter that might be more on the comedic side would be Shaun from Shaun of the Dead, and you can even have Ed as a legendary skin for him. Of course, this yet again would be very comedic, but having Chucky in the game makes it pretty clear they're a little more open to comedic characters being added into Dead by Daylight. Another potential survivor could be Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I put this here because this was on the satisfaction survey, and it is a pretty iconic license, so it could be a pretty cool survivor to be added into the game. A survivor I would love to have in Dead by Daylight would be Maxine from the X trilogy. We do know that Maxine, the movie, is releasing pretty soon here, most likely in 2024, most people are assuming, so it would be pretty good timing to add her in as her very own survivor in Dead by Daylight. Another interesting idea would be to have Andy Barclay from the Chucky TV series when he's all grown up. This is actually the kid from the original Child's Play but grown up, and it would be pretty cool to see Andy in the game. My only stipulation with this is I do believe they would have added him into the original chapter release if they were to do this. We've never seen them do part 2 chapters this soon after release, so I don't think this would be very likely. Next up, I do want to mention a couple ones that are not very likely in my opinion. So we have Ed and Lorraine Warren here. I don't think this would be likely because it would be kind of weird to have one of these characters as a legendary skin of one another. I think they should both be their own separate characters and be a double survivor release. It would also be a huge missed opportunity if they didn't add the nun as a killer for this chapter as well. So I think for this particular chapter, this would not be very likely at all, but maybe sometime down the road, because of course there is a connection between Dead by Daylight and Blumhouse. If you don't know, Blumhouse owns the Conjuring franchise, and Dead by Daylight is working with Blumhouse on the Dead by Daylight movie. So maybe later on we could see this as a chapter, but I think for chapter 30.5 it is not likely at all in my opinion. Another one that's not very likely in my opinion would be Stranger Things. Of course there is many survivors they could add for a chapter 30.5 solo survivor chapter. We got Hopper, Joyce, Eddie, many really cool characters. But I think it is too soon after them regaining the license to Stranger Things to have a whole character ready. And also, I think they would have it added with Vecna as a killer as well. So I don't find this likely at all. Before we move on to some more likely ones, I want to include another one I don't think is very likely, and that would be Sidney Prescott from the Scream franchise. Many people have been asking for Sidney Prescott for a long time in the game. However, not only there's the recent controversy going on with the Scream franchise, but also Neve Campbell has her own issues with the Scream franchise with pay disputes. So I do not think she would be likely at all, and especially right now would not be a good call to add anything Scream related into the game in my opinion. Now we can move on to some survivors I think would be pretty likely actually. So obviously Dead by Daylight seems to be more open to doing celebrities in Dead by Daylight. We have Nicolas Cage, and they were kind of toying around in the interview with The King and Polyester on YouTube that they're kind of playing around with the idea of adding even more celebrities. And I think a perfect celebrity to add into the game would be Elvira. Of course, Elvira is a very iconic character in horror. She does in fact own the license to the Elvira character, so you would only have to go through her and not anybody else. Also, Elvira is in Call of Duty Infinite Warfare Zombies as well as a cameo character, so she is open to being in video games as well. Another celebrity that I was kind of thinking of is Vincent Price. Many people might think this would be a weird choice, and I might agree as well, but In the King's interview with Matthew Cote on YouTube, Matthew Cote, the game director, also mentioned that he was kind of toying with the idea of them adding celebrities into the game that are no longer with us. And the only potential person I could think of that's kind of in the horror genre that's no longer with us would be someone like Vincent Price. He's in a lot of very iconic older horror films, so he would be a great choice for that. However, I'm not too sure if they are going down that route or not. I also saw many people online discussing the idea of having James and Chelsea from the Dead Meat YouTube channel added into Dead by Daylight. And James has actually said that he's open to being added into the game. I personally would love to see him in the game, but I'm not too sure what other people would think of this. I'd like to hear what you guys think in the comments. And lastly, I got a very strange potential survivor that seems to actually have some evidence that they might be working on this chapter down the road. And that would be Cassie Hack from the comic series Hack and Slash. They've collaborated with other horror franchises like Chucky, Reanimator, and many others. So because of the crossover nature of that comic series, it obviously would fit pretty well to have this character in the game as well. I'm going to show you guys what kind of raised my eyebrow here and made me think this could actually be a potential survivor in the future. I want to thank Jane Romero on Twitter for bringing this to my attention. Thank you for that. So yeah, here we have a tweet from Tim Seeley, who is involved with the Hack and Slash comic series. And he responds to a comment about someone asking if they would want Cassie Hack in Dead by Daylight. And he says, yeah, we briefly discussed it at some point. I'm all for it. I don't know about you guys, but this sounds like he contacted Behavior before and talked to Behavior about adding this character into the game. However, I could be wrong, and maybe they just discussed this internally with their comic book artists and comic writers and all of that. That could make some sort of sense, but it is kind of weird to phrase it in this way in my opinion. Also, another stipulation is this was back in 2020, so 4 years later, if that even was a possibility, it seems like it might not be anymore. However, because they are open to adding this character in the game, I will not rule this out completely, so I'll be sure to keep this one in mind for future speculations and stuff. To round it up here, my best bet is Chapter 30.5 is probably going to be Rick Grimes from The Walking Dead with some legendary skins associated with him. And Chapter 31, I think 90% chance is going to be a casting of Frank Stone chapter. And as always, hope you all have a wonderful day and stay safe in the fog, everybody.